All right, I think we are all set. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ladies Code Collective podcast. I am doing quite amazing today, actually. I just got back. Well, not just got back, but this morning I had an appointment at the sort of immigration office here in Toulouse, France, and I actually picked up my residency card, so I'm really excited about that. That gives me about a year of legal residence in France, and the next time I can get it renewed in a year from now, or a little bit under a year from now, I can get a valid residency card for about 5 years after that. So that's really exciting. It's been such a long process of just making sure I have all the right documents and the timing is right. And sometimes, I think a lot of the time, French administrative things are really confusing because there's no one way to do something. So, in other words, sometimes it just depends on the type of person that you're working with on a certain day. If they're having a good day or a bad day, you might be able to get away with not having the correct documents or all of the correct documents in your folder. And I don't know, there's always just been a lot of, I guess, loopholes, but also just a lot of obstacles sometimes with French administration. And I think that's one of the major things I've grown to learn while being here is just trusting the process. And I think that, especially coming from the US, where we're a bit spoiled with how efficient systems are in terms of, whatever administrative thing you have to take care of, typically there's a very streamlined process and you know exactly what to expect and the timeline of certain things. Whereas here in France, you have a general idea. You talk to person A who has had a different experience and person B who's had a completely different experience, and it all just kind of feels a little bit like you're having a bit of blind faith in the process. But I always notice with new Americans in France that we're so used to this instant gratification of a process or of something having to do with, I don't know, paperwork or anything, like at the doctor's office, anything like that. And new Americans who have just arrived, have been here maybe a year or maybe over a year, it's different for everyone. They're really frustrated with the pace of things. And I mean, I definitely was like that too when I first arrived, but I think it's just easier to accept how things are and kind of just go with the flow. Otherwise, you're just going to get so impatient with everything and make everything a little bit more dramatic or frustrating than it needs to be. And so I think overall this kind of ties into what I want to be talking about today, which is nice in terms of cultivating patience in our paths of becoming developers, whether we're teaching ourselves or we're going through a boot camp or in whatever capacity we're learning. If we pay attention to ourselves, like truly pay attention during the day, in various moments during the day, I think we would really discover just at what point our impatience is affecting us, especially with the advent of fast technology and fast loading speeds online. We've become super habituated to just to the quickness of things and to getting things when we want it at the exact moment we want it. A thought enters our mind of what we want to do, and then we expect that thing to be in our lives or like right in front of us, the next minute. And so that sort of instant gratification coming with streaming Netflix or going onto Spotify or YouTube and watching or listening to the exact songs you want to listen to at the exact moment. I don't know, fast food, all that kind of thing. I think it really does a bit of a disservice to us, especially when we have an idea of big goals that we want to accomplish, but then also want to have accomplished them the next day or that day, which isn't possible. So obviously, just a disclaimer before we jump into things, but I know not everyone is, as impatient as, well, I mean, just a generalization. I don't think everyone's can be labeled as impatient per se, but I think we all do, especially in, 2020 with what we have with that kind of thing. And if you're living in a fast-paced society, I'm just willing to bet that the majority of people today have their fair share of impatient moments throughout the day. So this podcast is just going to go over how to cultivate patience, especially when we are faced with learning and we're learning a new skill. So in our cases, coding or programming, but it can be really anything. It can be, starting a business. It can be, I don't know, even learning a new instrument. It can really apply to anything. So cultivating patience, it doesn't seem super sexy or interesting, I think, but I think when you really get down to it, it's really interesting. And as soon as we can accept the fact that we are not as patient as we could be, we start to learn how to leverage those sort of stimuli throughout the day when we find ourselves getting frustrated, a little bit tense when things aren't happening as quickly as we'd like. And then we can turn that around and remind ourselves that, okay, it's totally irrational when we get right down to it that I'm expecting this to happen today or tomorrow or even next week or even next month. We really need to, I don't know, I guess we really need to be able to fall back on patience as something that sustains us over the course of a long time in whatever we're trying to pursue. So, getting into it, I have 3 main points I want to talk about in this podcast about cultivating patience. And so the first topic, I guess, or I don't even know. The first point is to err on the side of savoring instead of devouring. So this can be applied to basically everything in your life and also life itself. So in general, I'm really coming to believe that life is meant to primarily be savored. I think that now, especially with so much competition, so many, we're involved in so many different outside things in school. Getting into the best colleges are super important to our society. When we're working, we kind of want to pile everything on and finish everything as soon as possible to move on to the next thing. When we have a goal that we want to achieve, we just want to achieve it as quickly as possible and then move on to the next and the next and the next. We want to accumulate things. I think that if we start to think about it in terms of savoring things and savoring experiences rather than trying to collect as many as we possibly can, it can slow everything down and it can just make enjoying the process of something so much more enjoyable. I'm freezing up. This will be edited out of the podcast, but if you're watching the video portion, thank you and bear with me because I'm going through my notes and anyway, it's the unabridged version. We spend our days devouring our work and waiting impatiently for happy hour and camping out in front of Netflix with a bottle of wine or 2 bottles of wine or whatever your vice, whatever your after work vice is. And then we go on to spend our weeks devouring the to-do lists of every single day, waiting impatiently for the weekend when we can go wild at a bar with our friends, only to spend the rest of the weekend totally hungover and recovering from that one crazy night. Then after those weeks, we go on to spend our months devouring whatever's in our way as we wait for that next trip or vacation that will eventually allow us to then devour that vacation time and to, if we're going to a different city, have us rush from activity to activity, touristic site to touristic site, able to snap a photo at each one just, for Instagram or social media, and never really take the time to, for example, sit at a cafe for hours or sit at a restaurant for hours and live like a local lives, and imagine yourself to be, or imagine yourself, no, imagine what it would be like for you to be a local there, to be living there. I think that, especially in that example of visiting a new place just for the opportunity to devour that, in terms of almost commodifying it as an experience to just add to our list of things we've done, without necessarily having those types of really long, pleasant moments and hours spent just living and existing in a different place. So, in a sense, now I'm kind of freeballing it here. If we switch the focus over from devouring and accumulating and trying to do everything at once just to be able to devour the next thing, if we change that instead to savoring it, so if we're learning how to code, if we're going on to the next lesson in a course we're taking, or if we're on to a next project, if we're savoring every moment of that, even when it's frustrating, even when we don't know what the heck is going on, it just, overall, those little moments add up to so much, and they just become so much more effective in the overall learning process. So that's the first one. Savoring versus devouring. Err on the side of savoring. Point number 2 is that learning is a practice in patience, right? So this kind of goes on to say that just as anyone has a yoga practice or a daily meditative practice, I think that learning, the act of learning something new or learning over the course of a lot of time, so learning to code, it's really a practice in patience, because when we're learning to code, we tend to get caught up in the idea that we need to move on to the next thing as soon as possible and just kind of master all of the content we're presented with. And we're like, okay, we need to have done this yesterday, so we're late, we're behind, we don't feel on track, even though there's no metric that says that we need to know one piece of information at a certain time, we need to follow that up immediately with this. I think that we feel as though it's almost like we feel that we've failed when we're not moving at this unrealistic pace. But the reality is that we haven't even begun. And when we're already behind in our minds, we feel as though we're not learning, even though those little building blocks stack one on top of each other each day to build those lessons in our brains. I mean, how many times have you felt like, if you were teaching yourself to code, or have you felt that, how many times have you had the feeling while you're teaching yourself to code or you're trying to learn a complex concept that you're just not learning it? Like there's just something in your brain that's telling you, you know what, this is not for you. It's been a week, it's been 10 days since you started learning this and it still hasn't clicked for you. I think that this isn't going to work. Let's move on to something else. And then just when you're about to kind of move on and or you kind of start to believe your brain that it's saying like, okay, this isn't for us, and then it just clicks. That's not the result of all of a sudden it just came out of nowhere and clicked. Okay, that's the result of you taking that time of that week, of those 10 days, and you kept showing up for yourself. You kept trying to learn it, even when it wasn't really cementing itself into your brain. You were kind of forging those like neural pathways or whatnot, and you were making it stick. I think that we don't give enough credit to those those small moments that accumulate of learning. I think that we're really proud of ourselves when we get something, and then we're really kind of disappointed in ourselves when we don't. And then if we give up, we kind of cut it off at the stump, right? But then if we keep showing up, even if we face that bit of disappointment in ourselves, if we keep showing up day after day, even when we say to ourselves, I didn't get it yesterday, I'm going to try it again today, I'm going to see if it works, like maybe approach it from a different way, sooner or later it's going to click. It's going to be in your brain, and then it's gonna feel really surprising, it's some weird magic that all of a sudden happened. It's kind of like a fluke, but it's not. It's because you kept showing up. It's because you kept treating learning as a practice in patience. And then the third point here in cultivating patience is, I think, one of the most important parts. It's to remove the focus on the end goal and place your focus instead on the day-to-day actions. So overall, it's good to have a goal that you're working toward, period. Just period, in that it's okay, there's your goal. Now don't fix on it. Oh my God. Can I talk? Don't fixate on it. I think that we have a goal and then we just think about that goal to the detriment of our days and what we're doing during our days. And sometimes we have our goal and we just like to, what's my word? We just like to just completely obsess over our goal, and we don't even start, because the goal is beautiful, the goal is amazing, and we have this idealized fiction version of ourselves where, yeah, it feels great to have this goal. We get this dopamine rush from having this goal, but then the thought of actually putting one foot in front of the other, it's a little boring, especially at the beginning when we don't exactly know what we're doing. And we don't even start. And that's just a shame. So don't fixate on the goal. Have the goal in place, but then build your systems and habits of each day that you're going to work to move toward that goal. I think those are the most important things when you're pursuing some sort of objective, because it lays the groundwork for where you need to go. If you have a goal, if you have some sort of dream, it can almost be like looking at a mountain made of glass and having to climb to the top, but you really don't, you have no conception of how that would work, because it's just a mountain of glass and you have to climb to the top, and but when you sit down and plan and you strategize about how long it might take you, what are some other tools you could use, that kind of thing, it just enables you to put one foot in front of the other day after day to achieve that end goal. So overall, fixate on the joy of setting those small daily goals that actually add up to something massive over the course of weeks and months. This also goes back to savoring versus devouring, in that you'll want to savor each day and task that you're working on something. Don't devour everything and then wake up from your rampage confused and just never being able to enjoy the process, only to start the whole process over when you do achieve that. It's not really an enjoyable life. And as each goal that we have, as long as we learn how to enjoy the process of it, I think that in itself lays the groundwork for just living an amazing life, right? It's the day to day. It's every single day that you show up for yourself. And then those days over the course of a lifetime, if you're finding joy in those days, you're going to just have a joyful life. If you're miserable while you're trying to achieve a goal, if you're really not showing up as yourself, it's really kind of a grind and not in an enjoyable sense, those days all accumulate as well, in the same way that the joyful days do. And then you might look back and not have as great of a life, because you just had to drag your feet. You had to white knuckle it the whole time. To conclude, those 3 points in cultivating patience, I'm going to list them out again. To err on the side of savoring instead of devouring, that learning is a practice in patience, and to remove the focus on the end goal and instead place it on the day-to-day. Taking this back to me getting my residency card for here in France, the overall process was absolutely a test in patience, right? I had a goal in mind, which was gaining legal residency in France, but I also didn't get overly wrapped up in the outcome. Like, if I did get overly wrapped up in the outcome, which is something honestly I can't control. I can control the documents I turned in, knowing what dates to turn everything in. But the overall outcome is the office calls me, they've accepted to give me a residency card or not, and I let it be. I focused on the things in my control, so the day-to-day actions that actually didn't amount to a lot because it was just turning in, filling out paperwork. But it's the same thing with coding. I'm focusing on the day-to-day actions in my control, so whether that's showing up for 60 minutes on an online course that I said I would spend 60 minutes each day this week doing, or if it's staying honest with myself when I say I'm going to build a certain project by a certain date. That's in our control. And savoring the time between each of those checkpoints, which is to say each of those goals, savoring the time that adds up to achieving those goals is really, I think, the secret to, I don't want to say life because that's kind of heavy, but I really do think it is the secret to a happy life, at least, because it makes the most sense. Again, you're spending your whole life, you're the majority of your days working towards something. You might as well make it joyful, cool. You might as well cultivate that patience and just learn to find the joy in it. All right, I'm going to wrap up. Announcements. I am speaking, I think this podcast will come out before the talk. It should. But I'm going to be speaking at Codeland Distributed on July 23rd. If you haven't gotten your tickets for that, they're free for the talk portion, and then they go up in price for workshops, but I'm giving a talk, so that's free. Go to www.codelandconf.com, codelandconf, CONF.com. And I think that's it. The talk is being utterly fearless in your pursuit of learning to code. All right, my friends, I will talk to you next week. Have a good one. Bye.